incorporating FLA into your classroom. This could be true really for any journal. What is unique about FLA is that it's really suited for this kind of work. It's the reason I applied to be the editor and wanted to be the editor of this particular journal, is the connection to classroom teaching, to real world language learning, even outside of the classroom, is really compelling and exciting, and a lot of the work that's happening there. Today we have 3 goals, or tonight there are 3 goals for the session. One is to just walk away with an understanding of the purpose and content of FLA, or flannels as we call it, because it is such a unique journal in the field, and it's an exciting one. From the variety of perspectives you get in different places that we get to work, which is neat. Also, to gain better insight into how to purposefully use FLA in your own classroom or in your own teacher training programs, whatever that looks like. That'll be kind of the bulk of the focus of what we do. And then better understand ways in which research published in FLA can inform future projects. And even more so, as Meg mentioned in the introduction, ways that researchers and teachers can work together, and educators, because that, I think, is the key to really the next step in the research in our field. Sound good? Everyone good with those goals? Anyone want to add any? I think you said most of them in your introductions. Again, as interactive as possible, feel free to throw some things in the chat.
Can I add something, Julie? I hope after seeing this, FLA will be more humanized for you. It'll be a place that you can kind of see as not just a journal, which is enough, but also the people behind it, and that your work is treated with respect and kindness.
Yeah. And those of you who both do the research side and the practitioner side, we want your work. That is the place FLA finds the most compelling research, is people who are doing the on the grounds work and researching it at the same time. So send that my way. It's exciting to see. Yeah, thank you. Alrighty, so let's start out the purpose and the content of FLA, or Foreign Language Annals. It is the flagship journal for ACTFL. It is the official referee journal of the American Council of Teaching of Foreign Languages. It was first published in 1967. So it has a really long history. And when I was interviewing actually for the editor job, I went back and I looked at some of the original issues because I was really curious about what was happening. And what is really unique about the journal is, although the issues have stayed the same, right? What happens in classrooms, what happens, you still see or the issues have changed. I'm sorry, you still see the same mission. You still see this connection to what's happening in classroom practice. And so the goal remains to serve professional interests of classroom instructors. Sometimes an article that may or may not belong in different journals tends to end up in FLA because of its practical purpose. Also to serve the needs of researchers in connecting those different spaces and really getting research out there, and then administrators across a range of contexts. So often I work to publish research that can help administrators advocate for the kinds of assessments they need, the kind of classroom practices, or the kind of supports they need based on research findings. And so that remains a mission of the journal and has been that way for quite a long time. Also dedicated to the advancement to the teaching of languages other than English. There are many, many journals out there that work with English language teaching. Super helpful to the work we do every once in a while, because we really want to showcase a population of learners, or we want to look at a specific issue. We do publish an article or 2 on English, but it is certainly not the priority in terms of learning languages. And so that is kind of the goal. It's one thing that sort of sets us apart from other journals in the field. Also, we publish the issue 4 times per year. However, Foreign Language Annals runs on an early view cycle, which means that we actually publish some articles ahead of time before they're actually put in an issue. So although during COVID times, the publication timeline in general across the world has slowed down, generally FLA is a pretty quick publication time. The articles that were just submitted in June are getting response times within about 45 days. So we're going pretty quickly again as we move ahead. So that's an exciting piece of FLA, COVID, of course, being the exception to that rule, but we're getting there. So COVID, everyone's sort of getting back on track just like that. So it's an exciting place. You'll see that each issue includes groupings of different topics and thematic issues. So often, at least since I've become editor, 2019, you'll find groups of articles together that give you 2 or 3 around this topic of a theme. So we're looking, the new one that comes out next week is around input. There's a whole section of articles on input. There's a whole section of articles on autonomy and motivation. And so anyone interested in those particular topics, they're not special issues per se, but they very much group group thematically to kind of inform one another as we go through. Any questions on that piece or something you want to clarify? Meg, do you want to add anything?
You know what I was reading this morning? I was reading John Carroll's article from 1967 on foreign language majors. It is one of my favorite articles of all time.
It's a good one. Yeah, nice. Any other questions or comments? Feel free to use the chat, or Sherry, just interrupt me if you see one. In the journal, you'll see really 3 types of articles. One that report on empirical research that really have significant implications for language teaching and learning across levels. We're always looking for languages that we don't publish a lot on, and population, so younger learners, for example, but you'll see a wide range there in those empirical research pieces. We also advance theoretical discussions on foreign language education, something that I'm starting to organize the content by for 2022 are theoretical discussions backed by different empirical articles. So coming up, we're going to have a discussion. There's a theoretical article that just came through on grammatical instruction and should we or shouldn't we? What does the research say? Where are we going in the future? And then 5 or 6 articles around what do we know about grammar instruction and how does that impact from the empirical side? And so the connection of those 2 will be even stronger as you move forward for some of these other ideas that I'm going to talk about. Also, documenting the effectiveness of teaching strategies to address a wide variety of emerging issues within the profession. And so always trying to keep up on the things that people are needing. If you have things that you want to read more about, let us know, because it gives us a chance to really either go looking for some of that research or to be sure we can group some of those together in different ways that we might not have seen before. To give you a sense of the publication process, just for those of you who aren't aware of what happens to an article when it comes to a journal, is you have an online submission that goes through a very heavy vetting process. It first goes to our managing editor to make sure it follows the general guidelines, that it's anonymized, that it's ready to go for review. Then it comes to my desk where I make one of 2 decisions. One is to send it for review out to external reviewers to evaluate the manuscript, to give detailed feedback, or a desk reject. A desk reject basically says it's not quite a good fit for this journal, or maybe the participant size isn't quite what we're looking for, or the population. Often English articles get rejected at this point if they're about the learning and teaching of English. So that happens there. And then the rest of the articles go out for review to expert reviewers. They undergo a review and come back with a decision of either minor revisions, major revisions, or a reject. The majority of articles come back as major revisions. The difference between a major revision and a minor revision is that a major revision goes back out for review, where a minor revision does not. It stays in-house, and we do all of the review information in-house. Those of you publishing, don't worry too much about a major revision. It is really, really common. It feels bummer. It feels like a huge bummer, right? It's like, oh, why did this come in? But really, that's where we see most of the best articles and most cited articles were major revisions at the beginning, right? It's getting really good feedback. It means you probably had a really good set of reviewers looking at that paper. And of course, some of them are rejected. Last year, we had a 17% publication rate of submissions to the journal. We're anticipating that'll likely stay the same, although we've seen an increase in submissions this year. So it's hard to know how that will impact some of that work. Once the reviews come back, a decision is sent by me with a summary and all of the comments, and then you go through another cycle of revision if it's a major revision. And finally, once it's accepted, it goes for copy editing and proofs. That's all done externally at Wiley. Through our publisher, they do a whole nother set of reference checks and copy editing and all of those pieces. And then yay, publication. Normally an early view first. An early view is online access to your particular article before it's compiled into an issue. It means if you're on the lookout for early view articles, you can often get access to pre-publication research, quote unquote, that hasn't been compiled in an issue. So check those out as well. Any comments on that? Those of you publishing, it gives you a sense. Those of you not publishing, it gives you an idea of what each article has gone through before it sort of comes to your desk for reading in those pieces.
Mhm.
All righty. Oh, Alice, yes, question.
Do you do book reviews? Do you accept like textbook reviews or
No,
other
we
kinds of
don't do
reviews? No.
those.
Okay.
Nope, we don't
thanks.
do textbook reviews or software reviews for foreign language analysts. We do love to see testing of textbooks though, which we don't get a lot of, right? The use of particular textbooks and how they affect learning outcomes and those kind of things, but not the materials themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. All right, so each manuscript, the empirical pieces have a methods and results section. The theoretical just usually skip those two sections. But when we're talking about use in the classroom, we're talking about how to use research for teaching and learning. These three sections are especially interesting to you all and something I recommend you start with before you sort of pour through all of the article in detail. One is looking at the challenge statements, and we'll look at that in a minute. One is really looking at the methods section to make sure the student population matches something that may not be the same as yours. Of course, no group of students is going to be the same, but at least something that could be comparable, as well as the discussion section, which gives you lots of ideas about implications. And especially in FLA, we spend a lot of time working with authors. Okay, great, here's your data findings. Now tell me what that means. What should people do with that? And sometimes what people should do with it is absolutely nothing, and that's okay. But to say that and say, hey, these are preliminary findings, be cautious in how you apply them long-term. However, they create a number of research questions that are really, really important. So let's be sure we do that next, right? Those are the kinds of implications you might see as well. All right, so just to give you a sense of where to find this information, you can access this in two places. One is through Wiley, directly through Wiley's online library. Some of the issues are open source. We have one open source issue per year, meaning it's freely available to members and non-members alike. Otherwise, you can get to your membership articles through the ACTFL webpage. Here's what that looks like. You can search Foreign Language Analysts ACTFL, it will show up. And once you're logged into the ACTFL site, you have direct access to the full issues of all of FLA. What's nice is you can search for these based on when they were published, as well as the titles, challenge statements, and abstracts right there. So even just digging through can be something fun, especially for new teachers who are working in different programs. Hey, find something on a topic you're really interested in and let's talk about it, right? Those kinds of things. So that is kind of where to find it, what to do. We're going to go to the next section in just a minute, but I want to stop and see if there are any more questions. I see one thing in the chat here. All right, cool. Yeah, Alice.
Could you back up the slide just one more time? That's a really helpful list. Just really quickly. And
this one? The other one?
That one. Thank you.
All right, perfect.
Okay, that's good. That's all I needed to see. Thank you.
All right, perfect. No problem. And this will be made available afterwards as well. So if people want to go back, you'll have it as you're going. All right, so awesome. That's FLA. It's out there. It's meant for your use. But what do we do with this, right? How do we use this information purposefully in classrooms? What are some things that we can do to really make the best use of FLA as we're going forward? And so this section, I'm going to give 3 tips and then actual activity ideas. So those of you working with teachers can set up these activities, take them, use them. Those of you who want to set up your own reading groups or work on your own, feel free to use these as you see fit. So tip 1 is just finding the information because people don't have a lot of time, especially teachers, right? Number of preps, the number of students we have. One of the really key pieces is finding the information you need quickly. And so there are 4 really good areas that can be helpful in doing that. One is the journal website search, just going straight to the journal. You know you want things that are practical, that have implications, and FLA is a good place to do that. Also looking for special issues. FLA has issues dedicated to special topics. 2 that I want to call your attention to are one from 2020 on technology and language learning. It's an open access issue. It happened, we published it in June, right after everyone went online in March for COVID. And it has a ton of information on using technology in the language learning classroom that is applicable post-COVID as well. It's not just about emergency remote teaching. It's leaders in the field who pulled together review articles and all of these topics. So check that one out. But there are a number of other ones that are out there. There's the 50th anniversary issue, for example, which has review topics. And then you don't have to keep digging for a whole bunch of other articles, because you can look at the research that's there and then find those particular studies. Also coming up is a special section on different perspectives on the role of input and if Krashen's research is relevant today. Some of you who know my own research bend will find that this wouldn't necessarily be my perspective, but the way that the authors have compiled the various perspectives really shows the way that disagreement can happen in the field in a way that is meaningful and useful and relevant to educators. And so it's a good one to check out as well as you're diving through. So that's a 2021 feature that it'll come out next week. It'll be there so everyone can see it.
Oh, Julie, Jesus had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it just came through. You're not late.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did not mean to interrupt, but thank you.
No, that's okay.
No, when you were talking about the structure of the articles that from what I can see, most likely report on research studies. I also wanted to know what you require of articles that have theoretical discussions rather than, a report of a study.
Yeah, great question. That's a great question. One thing is a synthesis, not a summary. So if I can't say that more clearly, it's a way to bring the ideas everyone has seen for a long time into the field in a way that no one's seen. So it might be, here are 3 key points that we haven't thought about related to grammar instruction or related to pragmatics or whatever those pieces are. And here are the points I would like to make about that. And here's all the research that supports that or doesn't support that in this case, right? So the more well-rounded approaches we can give to our research, the better, especially in terms of ethical reporting of those outcomes. And so really it's about the organization is key to making a good theoretical article match. And so I'm always looking for, what does this bring that's new to the field? And what are the really synthesized points that will be useful for people as they're pulling out this issue in particular? I don't know if that's helpful. If you want more, I'm happy to give more details as well.
It is.
Yeah. One caveat I often give when we're giving sessions for authors is avoid the tendency to give one paragraph on every study. Instead, the opposite is, here's all the things we need to know, and here's all the research that backs up those points, because often 3 studies make the same point. And so it helps sort of synthesize those. That would be the same as of a literature review and an empirical article as well. Yeah, awesome. All right, 2 other places that you may not have thought of or you don't typically go for finding information. One is the language educator summaries. I could have written that out. Sorry, TLE, the language educator, is the ACTFL sister journal for practicing teachers. In the back of every single issue, we have a summary of 5 to 6 articles directly relevant to the focus topic. So the research that backs whatever that focus article might be published in FLA. So check those TLE summaries out. Even if you go backwards a year, you'll start to see groups and compiled, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like here later. And then finally, the editor's message. So before you start digging, I always give a summary of how these articles work together and why we put them together, and give a very brief 2-sentence summary of what research is in it. If you read the editor's message, which is 1,000 words, less usually, if I can have enough time to keep it less than 1,000, that's the goal. You have an overview of everything that's in the issue right away, and you don't have to worry about digging through every single individual abstract. It might be that's not the topics you're interested in. Awesome, moving on to the next one. And so that's another place to really find some of that synthesized information that you might not think of right away. So I wanted to give that as a tip. Also, the second tip that I want to give is careful to draw conclusions from just one article or one methodology. One of the challenges we see is that there are different theoretical spins. There are fervent debates in the debate on second language acquisition. Some of them absolutely warranted and needed, and others really are just different perspectives. People looking at the exact same question from 2 different vantage points or 10 different vantage points. And so really the best outcomes for practice come from a combination of understanding those theoretical perspectives and how they might apply to different students. So often one approach is really helpful to one group of students, but maybe not so much to a different group of learners and vice versa. And so really being aware of that and trying to at least read two if you can. We know that time is limited, but at least getting different outcomes from that. This offers various perspectives that offer more practical insight, and review articles, again, are those theoretical articles we were talking about are really helpful in identifying some of those issues of, oh, here's where a debate is happening, right? Explicit, implicit feedback is a really good example, or different approaches, theoretical approaches to language learning. And so just looking at those can be really helpful, and being mindful of how you use those outcomes of one study, right? I will point you again to the 50th anniversary issue, as well as the technology and language learning issue. They're two really good review issues to get you started. So you don't have to search everywhere. You can just look for the articles on the topics that you're interested in and start there, right? It'll give you references and ways to look at some of that work. Finally, tip number 3 is trust your intuition and the research. One of the things is we know in combination, those two can be really, really powerful. Sometimes intuition tells us there's something kind of off about what this data is telling us. Why is that? Wait, I've been in a classroom. That doesn't work. That's not how I imagine that working with students. What kind of instructions did they give? Where does that go? What's going on? But also, there are a ton of myths in the field, right? A ton of things we do just by tradition that are not actually backed by learning science. And so if you can really trust both of those, you'll get the best outcomes possible. And when I was training graduate students and working with teachers, it was a lot of that. Okay, let's learn the science and then let's talk about how it matches with our intuitions. Things like corrective feedback, especially on writing, right? So we have this tendency to give detailed corrective feedback because we like to have it all perfect, right? We're language people, that's how it works. But what the language science and the learning tells us, the research tells us, is that that's actually not as effective as some other types of more analytical or deep thinking about specific grammatical points, or getting learners to do some autonomous correction. There are other ways to get at that. And so just be aware of those two different pieces. There are, of course, a million examples. That's just one. Thinking about motivation, thinking about input, but just remembering both of them have inherent value and are critically important to the best learning outcomes. It's sort of, the combination is where we get the best outcomes. Also, I want to remind us, if we build it, they may not come. The exact same study, the exact same intervention put in 2 different classrooms in the exact same school could yield entirely different results. So just be aware of that, right? It's not just how we sort of set things up and structure them. It could be that it just didn't work the way that the data worked in the previous work. And that doesn't mean the research wasn't good. It doesn't mean it doesn't help us. It just means like, oh, we might need to take a different perspective, or we might need to add more data to our data sets to get there. If you think of medical science, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of participants. In language learning studies, we have less, right? And so the replication sometimes vary a lot less, sometimes a little less. It just depends on what kind of research is being done. But we also have a lot different variables that are harder to control in some cases, right? So just be aware of how to use those. Those are kind of my 3 tips when we think about research and practice together as being critically important. Other questions or comments on that before we do it? All righty. Sorry, I'll give a minute. I know it's Zoom. All right, so a couple of ideas and sort of what I would call purposeful engagement with research, some specific activities. Feel free to take these and use them, adapt them, whatever you want with them as you're working. One is what I call the challenge statements. So what challenge statements are unique to FLA, but they're a brief 50-word global introduction to the theoretical issue or line of inquiry, which will be developed in the article. The challenge statements identify the topic under consideration and propose 2 or 3 core questions about that particular topic. So I'll show you 2 examples. Pronunciation is a critical component of learning to speak a second language, but do instructors of introductory language courses focus on pronunciation in their classrooms? Based on interviews and 22 hours of audio recorded classes, this article reports on the pronunciation teaching practices of 7 graduate teaching assistants at the University of French and Spanish, university level French and Spanish. Or connecting teacher practices to student outcomes is critical to identify elements of instruction that may lead to increased student proficiency development. How are students' year-long gains in performance influenced by teachers' target language usage and attention to explicit grammar? How do these relationships differ across language? So you can see that these challenge statements really set it up, right? This is what this article is going to talk about, but they're very, very short. So you're able in a very small amount of time to understand the fundamental key issue of that particular article without having to dive in. And if it doesn't apply to what you're interested in that moment, let it go. Right? And that is a hard thing to do, but it's important. And so when working with challenge statements, one activity that I was working on is really a collaborative look at the challenge statements. And this could be for one issue, it could be for 1 year of articles. And if you're working in a group, depending on the size of the group, but one, review the challenge statements of a current issue, or if it's a special issue on your topic of interest, have everyone read just all the challenge statements. Those are also available online in the Wiley site, so you can see them before you ever get the issue. Then have each person select one article to read and respond to based on their own interests. Say, hey, I'm really interested in this challenge. I'm really interested in this challenge. And then dive in, go back, take some time to review that one particular article, and then share your findings as a research summary with implications with your peers and with your colleagues. In doing so, then you've read however many articles, right, quote unquote, and it gives you a sense of what you can take away from that research, as well as the ways that you can share your findings for classroom implementation. It also gives you a really good jumping off point for brainstorming other activities, right, and other kind of lesson plans or classroom development spaces that you want to work in. Any questions on that one? So I would encourage you to use those challenge statements as we go through. All right. The second one is the TLE and FLA connection, really utilizing TLE and FLA as partner publications. We've worked hard to connect those two and make sure the research and the other focus articles really match. Again, I mentioned in each issue, you find a research summary. This is what it looks like. Eventually, we're hoping to build in some puzzles and some interactivity, but for now, this is what you see are these summaries of articles from FLA from the last 3 years is the goal that directly relate to that focus topic. And so diving in, working with this page, again, the challenge, the abstract, and it gives you a set, okay, cool, this is our focus topic. These are the things we're going to work on. An activity is, again, finding a topic you're interested in and identifying a few authors of the team would be interested in connecting with. And so using TLE and FLA to identify who those authors might be. There's often this myth, I think, out there that they're sort of the untouchables, right? Like, oh, I don't want to take up too much of their time. Oh, I'm really, really worried. But most of my colleagues, not all, but many of our colleagues, I think, on this call are willing to jump in and talk with teachers about their research and to join a call and to, I mean, I think I can at least speak for myself. It's probably the best part of my job is when we get a classroom. We were just in with high school teachers last week, and we got to work on building escape room puzzles and mixed media reality for review. And it was so fun to get to be there. And it's something that researchers sort of miss out on if you're in different settings. So inviting them in, identifying who those people might be, using TLE, using FLA to do that, and then asking an author to visit your team meeting, especially with Zoom. They can answer questions, they can offer ideas. What's really cool is, as a jumping off point, this can also be a collaborative invitation to say, hey, my classroom is open to collect data and to do research here, which is something researchers often struggle with, is getting into good classroom settings, especially in the K-12 environment, especially now post-COVID, many of the security issues. And so it becomes really, really critical. It's a nice way to sort of build research connections with your school and get support. In our case, often then with our center, playing my other hat, not the editor hat, but what happens then as funding comes in, and we're able to then already have partners to connect with and build research and build out programs and do that work. So using that as a way to engage with the research, it helps the publication again become more humanized, right? There are people on the end that wrote this, that have this expertise, and for the most part, there's very minimal cost involved with that. Especially if you don't use very much of their time and are really careful. So that would be another example I might give. If you're working with graduate students, I know there's some of you, having them get a chance to reach out to some of the scholars they've been reading and bringing them in can be a really powerful way, again, to connect that research and practice.
There, Julie?
Yeah.
Many years ago, in the pre-Zoom era, I worked with a group of high school teachers who were reading some of the research and discussing it as part of their professional development. And, you know, we couldn't have even dreamed of bringing somebody in on our teeny little budget pre-Zoom. But now, you know, kind of like, well, actually, I live in DC, and there's an author who my book club reads outside of linguistics who we can bring in because he's the neighbor of somebody. So think of it as like, you're so much more like, let me tell you, when Frederick comes to our book club meetings every 4 years when he has a novel, we've all read it. Like, we have our books marked up. We're so excited. So think of it as, you know, just an opportunity to get somebody in. I can tell you, most people don't approach me and say on the street and say, Meg Malone, you published an FLA. You're so famous. I'd love to talk to you. I would love to be invited to come to somebody's classroom to talk about my work. Like, that would thrill me to no end.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's common, especially people who are working on the type of research the FLA publishes, right? It's where they find passion and work and they're excited. So do that. Another one is take a look at the discussion sections of a series of articles in the same topic. So find 3 resources or 5, it depends on how big your group might be that you're working with. And if it's just yourself, find 3 that are interesting to you. And read just the discussion sections or the implication sections, and then use some sort of tool to compare and contrast them. So are these the same? What are the outcomes? We're talking about synthesis, right? This is another way to think about like, okay, cool. And then from there, you can read the rest of the methods and go out if it's of interest. If the implications are so disparate that, you know, do this, don't do this, then you can say, what's happening here in this research? And it gives you a different kind of jumping off point. Or, hey, my intuition says this one's much more right than the other. Let's go back and try to figure out why those might or might not go together. But using those discussion sections as a way to say what's in common across all of them is an especially useful tool for classroom practice, because typically that is what we see to be most effective for the largest number of students as we go. And then of course, sharing with your colleagues, the more that you can share, the better off you are. Also, always recognizing time is exceedingly limited. So the goal would be to crowdsource this knowledge as much as you possibly can. Some of you can do that more readily than others, especially the type and the size of district that you're working in. But just being aware, of course, if you're interested, you know, in connecting with people, we've been doing a number of webinars where people are interested in these types of topics. And so you can kind of connect. Here's some people on this call as well that you can connect with and work with as you go through. And so those are the main really researchy ideas, connecting the practical ideas for those. But let's look just for 1 minute in the future. Before I do that, are there any other questions or comments on some of those activities that people want to talk about? Other ideas that you have? We're a small enough group, we can absolutely brainstorm. And
oh, I just taught the methods class this spring, and that would have been really neat to work in. So it's too late for this year, but I'll tell the next teacher.
yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. I hear you. It's always sort of the next, but next year, right? Whoever's doing methods, connecting people, and there in most places, there are methods courses happening in fall. So check it out.
And Julie go ahead, Jesus.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that in the past, what I've done is I also teach a methods course in our master's program in teaching Spanish. And I've taken what I feel are very meaningful, very striking lines from different articles that I have assigned to my students before class, and then I've given them to different groups, And as I start teaching and those lines come up in my slides, I ask them to tell me, you know, what their insights are, based on you know what they read. But before I ask the class to answer, I ask each group to discuss those thoughts, you know, that I subtracted from the articles. And then something else that I've done is I have asked them to demonstrate. So back at home, they have to create an activity, craft a piece of material, do something with what they learned from the article that they can apply to the classroom. And so we have about 8 weeks of the semester that we devote to receptive skills, productive skills, intercultural communication, et cetera, et cetera. And so all those readings that they read, each student has to take, well, 2 or 3 students every class, they have to take a turn and demonstrate something that they feel the research is telling them that they can do that will prove to be effective. The whole class has to discuss whether they feel that it will work or not, or what other additions or observations, etc.
Yeah, that's really great. That's a great idea. And the practical application, another related activity I often do in methods is we read, 7 theoretical approaches to second language acquisition. There are more than 2. There's 7 that I work with. And the idea being, actually teach the exact same lesson using feedback from each 4 of those 7. So what would a sociocultural perspective look like? What would an interactionist perspective on corrective feedback? What would a conversation analytic perspective look like? And in doing so, you see the nuance in the different theoretical and the different research approaches and how that might sort of play out. It's a very similar activity, right? But around a topic and a different perspective.
And
Yeah.
Julie, can I just add something else? I use FLA. I haven't taught methods for a long time, but I use it in my testing class. I teach a class on study abroad. I've taught an undergraduate SLA class. And one of the things I love about FLA, and I love this before I ever worked at Actful, is the implications and the tie back to the classroom. So some of the favorite articles I use in these classes, a lot of the students just love them because I can say of my colleagues in testing, we're wonderful, but we're often thinking about the next test and not so much about the implications for the classroom. So FLA, more than just for methods.
Yeah, that's true. It is so true. Yeah. Any other comments or ideas or questions people have? Alrighty, so let's take a quick look at the future and sort of where we imagine some of these pieces, hopefully going, it's a quick one, but some ideas for some future research collaboration. One is ask an editor, and I'm specifically going to say, hey, if you're looking for a special issue on a topic you really care about, please feel free to email me, send those along. The more we hear from the field, it doesn't mean we're able to do it right away. It takes time to get that published, but the more excited we are to compile things that people are really interested in and really want to think about, not just sort of what happens to get submitted to the journal. So we're spending quite a bit of time curating and how do we get those pieces in the right place, right? Also invite a researcher. The more collaboration will lead to more productive and useful research. We did a town hall. Thank you to Actful's president, Jessica Haxey, and her work doing a town hall on research a couple of weeks ago, maybe even a month ago now, I don't know, time flies. And it was all about how do we get researchers and practitioners collaborating more? How do we do that? And so one of the future steps I really want to encourage and keep encouraging is inviting researchers into your classroom. Hey, if you need a place to collect data, I would love to open up my classroom to you. I don't know what you need. I don't have a ton of time, but if you need a space and some students and some learners, I'm here, we're here. How do we make this happen? And that can be really, really helpful and critical. And also I know many researchers would be really grateful for that and often would return that favor as well, right? Hey, here's some materials, here's some implications, here's the kind of things We built, for example, we just finished a mixed reality escape room experience to go with a textbook for learning Spanish. And we gave it to the school district and said, hey, thanks for letting us research. Thanks for letting us collect data. And now all their teachers have a copy of that particular curriculum out there. If anyone else, of course, right, you're welcome to, but they're there and they're happy to have that. And so that collaboration and connection can be really helpful. And it taught us a ton. Right? It taught us a ton to get to sit there watching. And so people are always looking for those kind of future collaborations as well. Oh, sorry. Accidentally hit the slide. Also, try your own action research study. If you've never collected your own data and thought about it, there's some really neat YouTube videos on action research in the language classroom. Check them out. ActFul actually has some really neat resources on that as well. Maybe we can get them in the chat. I'm not sure. If not, we'll be sure that we can post a link somewhere. But I think that even just trying it out and saying, hey, how does this data impact my classroom practice, whether or not you publish that, the idea that data can drive the kinds of decisions we make is really, really powerful. And it helps us avoid sort of the fate of intuition, which can cause trouble. Sometimes it's really helpful many times, and it can also cause sort of some challenges other times. So doing that yourself as you dive in. And then finally, checking out ActFul's other research activities, the research priorities, the research grants are out there around really key issues in those topics, as well as some upcoming research briefs and the syntheses. They're still forthcoming, and we'll see when those are actually sort of ready. They're challenging in terms of synthesizing a number of big research ideas, but really just kind of integrating that into the kinds of decisions you make can be really, really helpful as you move forward in the future.